So welcome to today's session of the Business Fuel Challenge. I get to be your host today. I am Rebecca Newman. I am the founder and CEO of the Grow Project. And today I get to be joined by an absolutely amazing human, Anthia Koullouros. Anthia is, I guess, at the heart, she is a naturopath and herbalist, as well as an amazing business owner, an incredible author who I have my dog-eared version, Anthia. An amazing author of the book, I Am Food. If you Google her, you will find she has widely spoken with many people in many different places about health. And in particular, I guess where Anthia and I come together is, while I believe really strongly in the impact of the foundations of business on performance and in life, my beautiful Anthia is an absolute guru when it comes to the foundations of health. And so when we first spoke about Anthia coming on board as the key mentor in the health position, in the looking at health for the Grow Project, the grounding principles of naturopathy was what really resonated for me. And what we also found was that we both worked with a very similar type of person, very clever, intellectually very, very smart, commonly very successful, driven by performance, and just so much going on, committed to growth in various different aspects of life. And interestingly, and one of the reasons that on the Grow Project, we have the business elements, the health elements, and the lifestyle elements, is because where each of those intersects is where, in my opinion, life and growth really, really happens from. And interestingly, I imagine it's still the case after all these years, Anthia, the people that come to see me often actually need to come and see you first because they want to grow their business, but health can be something that really stands in their way. And likewise, the very clever people who are coming to see you are often being held back in their businesses. So that relationship between those two pieces. Across the Business Fuel Challenge, people have had the opportunity to hear from Nat Gringoudis on Chinese medicine, Dr. Lisa Masters on therapeutic Japanese yoga. We've had beautiful Leandra chatting about chiropractics and the fuel of the nervous system. Of course, we've had Kate Kendall, who's gone into breath, and all of these pieces, I guess, to round out our Business Fuel Challenge, come back to those foundations of health. And so today, with no short order, I really wanted to kick into some of the keys of the foundations of health. And perhaps we could start off with Anthia. Could you tell me a bit about who you're currently seeing? Because of course, as well as running an amazing apothecary and a tea business, you also still see people in clinic. So tell me about who you're seeing at the moment.
Thanks, Beck. That is such an awesome intro. And thank you, so kind, for saying all those lovely words about me too. It's really interesting times, and I think these unprecedented times with COVID, and COVID, even though our restrictions have lessened and we're about able to move around, that people are still stressed and worried either about family members, the vaccine, loss of jobs, displacement, financial. So I think what we're seeing a lot of is people who are in trauma or just coming out of trauma, a lot of anxiety and overwhelm. And as a consequence of that is the symptoms that are associated with that, because if that affects your nervous system, so that nervous system dysregulation, which could affect your gut health, it could affect hormone health and could affect immunity. So that's the type of client now, which is the client of the times, if you like. Other than that, we're still seeing, patients, particularly women. I do see lots of men as well, but particularly women who want to learn more about their hormones, about being on the pill, about perimenopause, about HRT. So really embracing something within them that they haven't learnt about before. Either they've taken for granted or just never paid it too much attention, um, and suddenly want to do a deep dive.
I think
And
the environmental factors there, Anthea, are so interesting because, like in an economic world or in a business world, it can beautifully be split into the three phases of the shock phase, the recovery phase, and the rebuild. And in an economic sense, what then follows is boom. But it's very interesting that there's lots of different times in life when we experience these immense amounts of change. And COVID just seems to be such an environmental factor of our age and really bringing to the surface all different kinds of systems in our entire system, in our business, in our health, in our mental health, in our body, in our family systems, and all of those intertwining pieces. And I think it is really interesting time in terms of, and I know this was partly how I became connected with you many years ago, and through our my integrative GP, Dr. Min Yeo, was really looking at, there was something that wasn't quite right in the puzzle, and yet I had learned a lot about my body when I had children, but it wasn't something I grew up with, unlike yourself. And perhaps it would be good if you could tell us a bit about your roots and your early time of how you grew up, because I guess many things that you teach are deeply within you and have been for a long time. Whereas for me, it was something that took me nearly 3 decades to really start paying attention to, beyond wanting to understand it from a human performance point of view. It was, how's my body really working? And even now, when I see certain pictures of anatomy, I'm like, okay, hang on, it wasn't for me then, and it didn't really soak in. So it's interesting that different triggers bring very capable people, I think it would be fair to say, are those underlying people that you see. But can you tell us a bit more about your roots and how that's come to connect you with people in different communities and, yeah, those that see you during different environmental times?
you're right in the sense that it feels very innate for me. And I think it's because it's what I inherited from my parents. It's innate within themselves. And I think being very close to the source of their cultural upbringing as Greek, Mediterranean, Cypriots who dad came when he was 11 to Australia, mum when she was 18, but they grew their own food. They used the local village person to help them with healing, whatever that name was. And so I feel like, being born into that, it's like I embodied that very quickly. But then I talk about this story where I found this book called How to Get Well by Pavo Areola on my parents' bookshelf, and it just made sense. And he's a naturopathic physician who was looking at the underlying causes and contributing factors, A to Z, of all these kind of health conditions. Now, at the age of 12, how would I have known or even been attracted to something like this? It's just because we grew up with it. And so then I started studying naturopathy. I knew this was a career because we had a family friend. So a few things, isn't it funny? A few things just pointed to this career. And I'm so glad I discovered it so soon, so quickly, that there was an actual career that I could have. And so I've been practicing now for 26 years, and I'm so grateful for it because, you're a practitioner of service. What we're trying to do is look for the underlying causes, contributing factors, see how patients' healthcare, self-care, their environments, how they live, how they think, how they feel. So it's very, very holistic, looking at their imbalances, their dysregulation, their deficiencies, and seeing if is there something that they can change or alter within day to day that will make them feel better or get to the root of the why. So I feel, and more people are wanting this approach. They don't just want to take a tablet or even a supplement for that fact. They want to know why. They want to spend more time. Like there's fast fashion, but then there's really good quality fashion. And I think when it comes to healthcare, self-care, I think there's both. But when something's persistent and consistent, they will take the time and energy to find out more.
And I think that, I guess, the environment of COVID-19 has also brought the wealth of health to the fore for people in different ways. I do want to talk about fads today. I do want to talk about supplements, as you know, some of the places that people come to, and into some of those other foundational areas. I think one thing you've mentioned, we've had many conversations. We love a good rabbit hole, you and I, with our shared passions. And I think one thing that you've said was around how the healing of self is something that you help guide people with, but that you also create space to be there. Is the word you use case manager? No, I don't feel like it's quite that piece of language, but that you help them to connect back to themselves.
I think some people call it a coach, but I've never called myself a coach either. It is holding space, it is gathering information, it is holding presence for healing. It's a patient's journey, a client's journey, and we're just part of that path. But I'm the gatherer of intel, if you like, is just draw it all in and kind of translate it into something that is applicable to day. I don't think that's the right wording, but you get my drift of what it is. And it's really lighting the path for them and illuminating, hold on, this is an area that we haven't looked at. This is another area that we need to look at.
Definitely. And that's definitely what you have helped us all do in our family, right down to, you know, connecting the children to how they're feeling with their teas. And you do an absolutely amazing job and in distilling that information to a way that it resonates. Like you mentioned of the book you picked up when you were really young, it just made sense to you. And for me, that stuff didn't make so much sense for whatever reason, for so many moons. And now, you know, that element of being able to sift through the information and apply it to the individual and help them apply it to themselves, and ask those really important questions that it is hard to ask yourself. And those guides that we have, you do an incredible job. And I remember the basics of some of the frameworks we first worked together on, and in particular the spring reset, I think back in 2015, and Mark and I both did it together. And I remember the seemingly beautiful simplicity of that, but how you had distilled so much into those resets. And I do want to talk about those as well. But I guess one thing I see systemically, which I think you see as well, is these uppers and downers that many people are moving through life with. And I'd not really thought about it as a language piece until you kind of mentioned it one day of, oh yeah, there's the uppers and then there's the downers. Can you talk to me a bit about uppers and downers, what that means to you? Sure. And how you think it's come to be that uppers and downers is such a common way of being for people?
I think people want to feel better quickly. So when they're not feeling well, and that could be low energy or poor cognition, just kind of swimming in this brain fog, they're seeking a quick fix. And a really quick fix upper is caffeine. And some people consume a lot in the form of coffee and Coke and other caffeinated food products to give them that quick boost of energy and clarity. And then we have downers when we're too revved up or too much running on adrenaline and anxiety. Then we have something that we'll either take or do to bring us down. And so people take all sorts of things, whether it's medication, over the counter prescription medication, whether it's painkillers, sleeping tablets, or they're constantly looking for some type of herbal alternative to just bring them down. So it's always this up or down, rather than sinking into daily flow. And sure, things aren't always going to work out that day. We don't know what's going to land on our plate, but we want to do more of this rather than this and down. I mean, another upper is sugar. People consume copious amounts of sugar to give them energy, but then they get the crash and they need a bit more sugar. And it's the same with caffeine. And people are just doing their best to manage how they feel. They're stressed out. They're overwhelmed. They're running in fight, flight, survival mode, or then they disconnect and freeze because it becomes so overwhelming. It's too much. And they bounce between fight, flight, freeze, fight, fight, flee, freeze. So then their choices are to help those different parts of their nervous system adapt.
And so I guess, where do you start, Anthea? If you identify that you've kind of like, oh, actually, there are those uppers in the mornings, there are those wines and downers in the evenings, or there are those crutches of supplements, like just general unprescribed, I would say is probably the right word, supplements, or in some cases recreational drugs, or all different pieces. Where does that overwhelmed, skilled, often person who has often a massive toolkit of amazing skills that they just don't seem to be able to access, where do you start?
Well, most people don't start, they don't prepare themselves for scenarios. They wait till they crash and burn. So most people have a forced holiday, so they'll get sick. And then perhaps in that time, if they've been sick enough or crashed enough or burnt enough, that they might think, hold on a second, this is not a way to live. This is no existence. Surely there's another way. And then other people, there is maybe enough space, there is enough space to consider, maybe there is another way, and maybe I do know what has worked in the past, so I'll apply the things that have worked in the past. So maybe I'll take a break from coffee and sugar and alcohol would be a start, and then that gives them a sense of wellness or well-beingness, and they think, okay, this feels good. And it's almost they've learned the tools to recalibrate.
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere along the way, they've gained some awareness. And if they find that little bit of space, they can apply the tools that they have already learned that's worked. So it seems to be one or the other. I think if people are listening to this today and they'll say, yeah, I'm there. So they'll do the most obvious first, is clean up their diet, eat more fresh food, do the real basics, hydrate better. I think people are intelligent enough to be aware that, especially the ones who have they have enough tools in their tool belt to regulate, they can do that. It's just, is that enough? Is that enough? Or are they really just managing stress? They're recalibrating, but they're still managing stress, and they don't really like what they're doing, and it's not how they want to live. Versus the person who might be completely unawares and just crashes and burns and gets sick. I think sometimes it's just doing the most obvious. If there is some awareness and there are enough tools and there is some space, do the most obvious first. And if that doesn't work, then seek expert advice.
And what do you see are the obvious foundations of health, in case they're not so obvious to people?
Yeah, I think
they weren't obvious to me for a long time. I had no idea of the impact of those things.
I think the time is different now because of social media and Google. We can and online magazines. It's like five top tips for blah 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 blah. So there's a lot of, I feel like there's so much information, it's almost confusing. It's eating fresh food, it's eating seasonal food, it's eating healthy plants, healthy animals, organic, it's reducing toxic chemical load, it's getting fresh air and sunlight, hydrating, taking time out and being in nature, going to bed early, waking up early, moving your body. I'd say they're the basics. People now know to meditate to help them get really present and still, so they create the space, which creates the awareness, which creates the choice. So I think there is at different times, because there is so much more information out there. But at the same time, if someone is so stressed out, they're in fight, flight, or they're in overwhelm, freeze, there is no space. Their mode is survival. It isn't to even consider, is there another way to live? So they're not going to be tuned into that, because they're just going to be putting out fires. That's about it. But I think somewhere deep within people, because they've either read it, they've experienced it, they're doing some of those basics, will make them feel better. But is that enough to make a significant change so they don't keep falling back into these older patterns?
Yeah, and it's interesting as we kind of get the layers of depth in that experience too. So not only can we recalibrate, and I know your seasonal cleansers are an amazing tool for that, and a beautiful reminder for people to come back to create that space if, you know, those pendulums come along and we go through these different cycles. It's a beautiful thing to come back to those basics that you mentioned around sleep and circadian rhythms and being out in nature and being able to breathe and nourish our bodies with food. And I do find and available, thankfully, easily, because you put them into digital form and all of your amazing knowledge into your, you know, babies. And seasonally, to remind yourself to come back. I remember I still commonly the most first thing I experience on your seasonal resets is actually the reminder of hydration. And the beauty of hydration combined with beautiful teas. And those seasonal phases is something I learned a lot about from you. It was not really something I understood. Like, obviously there's changes in temperature, but it's not really something I'd observed before about how food changes, how our bodies change, how our needs change, and how working with the seasons can really help us. And autumn is an amazing time for creating change, which is why I'm so thankful that it's the hallmark of our fuel challenge, because we're able to look at what fuels us, but we're also able to look at, like the trees, what we can let go of so that we can have the best nutrients to move us through winter and then to come and have a beautiful, fruitful spring. So I'd love if you could chat a bit about the foundations in combination with the seasons. Why are the seasons so important, and how does the naturopathic philosophy integrate those foundations with seasons?
The seasons are important because we as human beings are nature born, and so we are symbiotically connected. We feel nature's changes. So when it's cold, we feel cold. When it's hot, we feel hot. And so we adapt to those changes based on the food on offer. So due to the seasons, different foods are on offer. So we're coming into the winter months soon, but notice how there's more citrus fruit and how extraordinary there's more citrus fruit, which is rich in vitamin C, which is important for immunity. So nature gives us a lot of information if we really tune in and align with nature. So if we're moving into these colder weathers, then we want to warm up with herbs and spices that will promote circulation. But isn't it interesting, those herbs and spices that do that, such as ginger and cinnamon, are also very antibacterial and anti-inflammatory. So why it works is because we need to situate ourselves back into nature, so we don't feel displaced, because nature will basically ground us when we reconnect, and we feel the changes via our senses, so visual, taste, smell, hearing. That in itself is very grounding, because it's reality. That is what's happening at this present time. And it's very soothing and balming to our nervous system. So I always say to patients, and this is how you know how connected you are to nature, imagine life without the moon and the stars and the sunshine and the sunlight and the trees and the garden and the flowers and the sea. What is there? It's where you go to holiday. It's where you go to disconnect. It's where you go for relief or for fun. Imagine what that would be like without it. So that's why it's so important. It's because it gives us a lot of information if we sit still enough and listen, or connect enough and listen. And the purpose of a seasonal reset, which are just 21 days, is to let go of what doesn't serve, let go of the crutches, the uppers and downers, create some space for the stuff that does serve. So it's a reminder, it's just a seasonal reminder 4 times a year to connect back with reality, I suppose, just to give a bit of space. And I'm not saying that people are not in reality, but real life is in real time, outside of an office or outside of a home, like what is happening outside, not just what's happening inside. What is nature doing outside? I think it makes us value nature more as well, and where we will protect it more if we connect with it. I think people are growing their own food, so they're connecting more with the value of food and how hard it is to grow food, and therefore you throw some money at that organic orange because it's like, oh my God, I know how hard that is. Gosh, there's so much we can really do a deep dive on, but I think you get the gist of what it is that I'm trying to say.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it also connects really nicely into food. And just before our paths crossed in a clinical setting, when I started to learn about food as medicine, and that's definitely something I have a heightened awareness of, whereas before I kind of felt like it was a bit of a mute spot. It was kind of like, okay, I can understand that as a theory. I remember it felt really daunting and really scary to kind of change some of the food things. And I probably gave it more consideration back in the day than I probably did to prescription medications and all different pieces of advice. And so it was a very interesting piece to be wrapped up in at the time. And as time and seasons have progressed, I've learned so much about food. And I think the seasons has really helped to simplify it, as does organic shopping and farmers markets in a way, because that's what's available. And your book, I Am Food, as I say, it's got all the markings and all different things in it. It is such an amazing resource to connect seasons and foundational principles into a way that you can actually bring it to life and do it. How did you come to create this baby?
Yeah, it was a time in from about 2010, I noticed people were asking more questions about food, and they were confused, and there was more and more information. So the internet superhighway came and brought with that lots of information, and Eat this, don't eat this, follow this diet, don't follow this diet, eat fats, don't eat fats. Whereas for me, it was always very simple in that food can be good or bad depending on the source, where it comes from, how it's grown, how it's been reared, the quality of the soil, the seasons, the chemical intervention, source, and processing or preparation at the kitchen end or the factory manufacturing end, which will either yield good nutrition and a capacity to digest, capability to digest and assimilate those nutrients. So I just thought it doesn't matter what the diet is to begin with. Let's healthy plants, healthy animals, healthy soil, seasonal, local, organic, get back to the foundations. And then from there, once those things have been applied, we make the individual bespoke adjustments depending on a person's needs. If they're expending a lot of energy, if they're about to conceive, if they're breastfeeding, if they're burning the candle at both ends. So you adjust accordingly after that. If they have specific religious beliefs, that's the bespoke part of it. But get back to the foundations first and foremost. And that's why I wrote it. And it came to me quite easily because it's what I'd been hearing over and over and over and over again. I thought, we need to solution this. It has to be much more simple. It's not so complex, but it sounds complex on the outside. I get it. Too much information, everyone gets confused, and then it paralyzes everyone.
Yeah, that information paralysis, analysis by paralysis, and you just, you get completely stuck. And I think your book and the way you have been able to distill your knowledge to make what is important very simple, and to address things that people might perceive for whatever reason seems important or has had a big fuss made of it, and you distill it into a way that allows people to actually act and to take those simple steps, and to chip away at things. And you really dispel quite a lot of myths in there. There's things on why do we soak certain foods, and why does it matter, what's the point, if we can make it, in the modern world of, if we can make it quicker, why don't we just make it quicker? But it comes back to the source, the processing, and I guess as part of that processing is the preparation of food, and therefore how we're able to digest it. Can we kind of go into that fad space for a moment? Because cleansing as a phrase seems to come and go, and a lot of hype around cleansing and detoxing. And for me, I've found it to be very different, about what cleansing and detoxing means from a naturopathic philosophy. Can you tell me a bit about cleansing, what it means to you? Can you tell me more?
Yeah, well, I so hear you, because even as we're talking and I hear the word cleanse again, and I always shirk up a little bit because it's like, it's like the word natural and organic. It has all these different meanings and not my meaning. So how do I bring out my meaning? Isn't it awful when that can happen? Because generally speaking, cleansing and detoxing out there is different to what I think it is. For me, it means creating space. It's clearing a way to create space and to bring in what better serves. It's unraveling. It's dissolving. It's dissolution, holistically, mind, body, so we can connect to spirit, soul. It's to let go of false identity stories, if you will, so our true self can rise up from that. That's what it means for me. It's if you've taken some shortcuts and you're using lots of coffee, which isn't good for you, to clear that gently aside and to basically fuel up with something that is, what's the word? Sustainable, keeps you in flow, not up and down, gives you a foundation to draw on. So that's what it is for me. And yes, we use teas and tisanes to support that, and food as medicine to support that, because we still have these organs of detoxification, which will detox our body, whether we like it or not. They just continue to do that. But again, it's that clearing space so they can do that more efficiently or more effectively. So we prescribe plant medicine or herbal medicine to support those organs of detoxification: bowel, liver, skin, urinary, spleen, so on and so on. So
I do think it's amazing how you do look at all the systems, and when you take people through those phases of, you know, kind of each of the weeks of the 21 days, and you take them through the reset, the reconnection, and that amazing, not only bringing awareness, but also the weeding and the seeding for how we want to proceed.
yeah. So yes, another word that we use is gut gardening. We weed the garden before we seed the garden, and we create is a really healthy, fertile, rich soil, which is our gut biome. So we can grow from that, because then that fuels how we digest and process food. It's a two-way street, that one though, but that fuels our immune system, our mind, our mood and mind. So I think if it's seen that it's a two-way street, but a three-way, four-way, five-way street, it's holistic. That if we can recalibrate our different body systems at the same time, and what I mean by that, just the circadian rhythm or our immune system, then a lot of that just gets done just by applying the foundations, creating space to bring in more of what we're attuned or aligned to, more
And
nature inspired things.
can you kind of build upon that a bit and speak about teas,
Yes.
and also about herbs and plant-based medicine? So I guess first of all, what is herbal medicine, for those who don't have experience with it, and how did you come to a place where herbs and spices became more than about cooking, and why is tea such a signature part of what you do now on have done for a long time? So yeah, a bit more about kind of the herbal and plant medicine, and then tea, herbs and spices.
We grew up using herbs as medicine at home. My grandparents grew herbs, and we knew what they were good for. And we grew up as tea drinkers, not coffee drinkers. But then it was the era, right? The 70s, 80s, and then coffee came. So, you know, aniseed tea for sore tummy and chamomile for restless night's sleep. As a naturopath, a modality that we use to help regulate or recalibrate or transition from disease to health or wellness is herbal medicine. So herbal medicine is the use of plant medicine. Plants are our original medication, our original drugs. So aspirin came from the ingredient that makes aspirin came from willow bark. And so a lot of the origins of our medicines came from plants. It's within a plant, it isn't just one active constituent. There's multiple, like it's all, the whole plant will be used, or a part of the plant, whether it's the whole leaf. We, you know, each individual ingredient isn't extracted and refined. We kind of use it pretty holistically that way. But the same plants or herbs can be used in cooking. For example, rosemary and lamb is just one classic example. Rosemary stimulates bile flow, which helps us emulsify, digest fats. So you see these kind of little marriages between herbs and food and how they support digestion. bitters, anything that tastes bitters, endive in food, rocket, radicchio, but then bitters in herbs, such as gentian and angelica, in a more medicinal, stimulate digestion, which helps us digest and process our food when taken as an aperitif or a digestif. So I've gone down that rabbit hole that we usually go down. So the
But
thing
you're
is
spot on, Anthea, with how you because that's your origin of what you knew, and it's innate for you in those traditions that came in through food and cooking. And then you, in your original apothecary in the 90s, I think, when you set that up, as a place for people to go, and your amazing A to Z wall of all your herbs and spices that came on to become your blending for your clients. And then people started asking, could I have that in my restaurant? And how did tea, I guess, become such a big part of your world and your story?
So that originated as something that I grew up with, but then in a business sense, well, we prescribe teas. It's a really easy modality. It's a really easy way to prescribe plants as medicine in the form of teas and tisanes. So teas being green and blacks and everything in between, and tisanes is a herbal infusion, which is normally caffeine free. So it just meant people could take something home and take it as a first aid remedy to help alleviate symptoms and provide some kind of relief, or create a sense of groundedness or a sense of calm or balm. Teas and tisanes can be uplifting as well, but it's like, put the kettle on, let's have a cup of tea. It's like a moment in time. It just made sense to me as a modality. I mean, sure, I could have gone down the route of creating a supplement company with herbs in supplements or herbal tinctures, which is in my apothecary. When I see a patient one-on-one, we may prescribe something a bit more gutsier, a more concentrated form of herbs or plant medicine. But I just thought it would be how nice it is for people to be able to open up their cupboards and think, I've got a sore tummy, what can I take? I'm experiencing fluid retention. Is there a diuretic in that? It's just such an easy and delicious modality. And there's something about having a cuppa with a friend or a family member, or on your own as a way of reflection and stillness.
And you do that so beautifully, and I feel very grateful because it's something I've been able to give to my children. And we have our nicknames of your teas, and I know we've talked about some of the more therapeutic ones, or this beautiful baby, which is your shine tea. And so my girls just call it shiny. And if they want to feel shiny, then, it's one of their favorite teas to go to. And it's been beautiful, because then we can have a conversation about how do you feel, and the way that you have on all of your packaging around the traditional therapeutic use. But beyond that, I actually, Anthea, didn't know tea could taste so beautiful and so amazing. And I guess the teas that I had experience of, which was very minimal, they didn't smell. And if they did, they didn't smell very nice. And it was kind of, I guess, a synthetic smell, which is kind of what's happened in their processing. But your teas were like a completely different experience. And be it, these beautiful cleansing teas to support in seasonal resets with your amazing new Apotheca small blends, it's really been amazing. And the kids have come to learn about marshmallow root, and as you say, so many traditions, even down to aspirin. The root source of these things was actually a plant medicine, and along the way, I guess the information is not as readily available and people don't know. But it's lovely to be able to support myself and the children, and to take that moment to say, would you like a cup of tea? And the children will go, yes. And then we're able to have a conversation around, okay, so would you like a marshmallow tea, or is it more something that you need with mint to help you digest, or just the different teas and the different ways you can have conversations, and just little things, Anthea, we make them into popsicles, so they'll blend the tea, particularly say the apple tea or the pineapple tea, and then they will blend them, and it's so beautiful. They'll make them into icy poles and be all proud and put them in the freezer, and it's just become a really nice way to connect them to the idea of something that is simple, that they can do, that will last with them forever. And I'm very grateful for your teas, and I think everybody who knows me knows I'm a massive fan, and I gift your teas. They go into the homes of all our building clients, and yeah, your teas are very special, and it's helped me also to understand some of those herbal pairings in my love of cooking, and to understand what sits behind those things that people have done for eons. And yeah, I think it's a great and simple way to connect back with a beautiful, simple fuel. And as I know you do at our every event related to the Grow Project, and at our beautiful Grow Lab preview, you take us through a ceremony, and it's that moment to reconnect with yourself and to smell the tea. And some days teas smell great to me. Some days they are like, I don't think that's the tea for me today. So, but you take us through those ceremonies to really take that moment, to take a breath, to create the space, and just to take a few sips for ourselves. And they are a beautiful supporting part of your cleansers and of the way that you do your work, and you educate people. And yeah, even those, a bit of like, there's all this stuff I didn't even know originally was on your boxes, and then sometimes it's like I'll turn it over and go, oh yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, because I haven't kind of really thought, oh, it's my liver that's not playing, and then thought, oh, actually I'm a little bit cranky, or the gallbladder's going bananas and I'm doing lots of organizing. So how can I help support my system when I'm in a time, as well as keeping those foundations as much as possible? How can I use something beautiful yet very clever and distill down into a completely beautiful loose leaf tea or beautiful silk tea bag to really allow me to have that moment. And I think the other time of day when we have lots of tea at our house, Anthea, is when Mark and I have different preferences when it comes to sleep tea. But it was probably one of the places where it came in. And I know you've spoken about cycles, and often people will ask me in a performance space, what do I think is the most important part? And I never can go past of performance. What's my number one tip? And I have to come back to sleep every time. Like, I recognize tea immensely. Fuel has completely changed in terms of food. I used to think it was about life when I was in my youth was 80% movement and 20% food. I flip that now, but then when I realized sleep, and I used to be a night owl, I used to be, as our beautiful friend Leela would call it, an adrenaline junkie. I would get that wind and go all night. But can you talk a bit about sleep, what its job is, and the different kind of phases between 10 and 2 and 2 and 6, but what sleep can tell us, and perhaps a bit of the why behind why I might say it's one of my most number one tip. If you can get your sleep right, it will really make a difference.
I think it's when we have to rest and we disconnect, and we get the surge of hormones that help rejuvenate and heal during the night. And if we miss those windows and we keep going and we're running on adrenaline and then prolonged stress, cortisol, then we miss out on that reset, that recalibration of our nervous system. We need melatonin, but if cortisol is out, melatonin won't come out. So cortisol needs to switch off, or melatonin needs to come in. Between 10 and 2 is physiological repair. Between 2 and 6 is psychological repair time. We say wind down with the sun, be asleep by 10 in this time zone, and then wake with the sun. And it obviously it changes with the seasons. The body loves a rhythm, loves a routine, and it will feel threatened if we change that. And then we kick in that fight flight mode. And that's when we get the release of adrenaline and therefore cortisol. So sleep is absolutely fundamental. There are times we can't sleep, or we don't sleep because we're so wired. We're so much in fight flight that we cannot sleep. I think when patients are aware of what's happening, they can take some of the stress away from it as well, because some of the stress that comes with not being able to sleep is the anxiety about trying to fall asleep, and then it just, you loop into these patterns of you don't sleep. The more you're trying to sleep, the more you don't sleep. So sometimes I'll say, you know what, have a notepad there, as long as you don't switch on the digital. Either get a book out, read, have a notepad there, just jot some stuff out, and you will naturally and eventually fall asleep. It just may be a time that you're processing through a lot of information. Hopefully it will be short-lived, or support the sleep process, is because if you're so wired up during the day, it's going to be really difficult to sleep.
And you mentioned melatonin as part of its relationship to sleep. Can you tell me a bit about melatonin? Because I definitely grew up almost being completely fearful of the sun. Can you explain how melatonin is produced and its relationship to sun and therefore into sleep?
So we need complete darkness for melatonin to be released. So if we're up and we've got lights on, or we're exposed to a lot of sound, so our senses, something is igniting our senses, but particularly sensory stimulation plus light, we won't get the release of melatonin. And that's what's critical. We need to be in a dark room, a comfortable room, little stimulation, sounds, scents, that will disrupt that flow of melatonin, which is necessary for sleep, but that gets released in a dark cycle. So we don't sleep with the lights on, and we don't sleep with the windows open. We try and close the window, the shutters or the curtains, to keep that darkness. Yeah, otherwise cortisol's out, otherwise we're on, and it's exhausting. And a lot of the reasons why people are exhausted is because they're not getting good quality sleep. It's one of the many reasons.
Yeah, I don't think I realized I remember a number of years ago when my beautiful Chinese medicine doctor Lisa said to me, Beck, I just want you to go and sit outside on the grass for half an hour a day. And I don't think I realized before then how my day was very connected to being inside. And it felt almost impossible at the start to take that half an hour and go and sit out, and where possible to try and get sunlight on the torso. But it was a really interesting experiment to take the time, sit on the grass, just breathe and be in sunlight. And it was very interesting to see how quickly it had a correlation to my sleep and making it easier for me to fall asleep at night. It probably also helped that I wasn't in air conditioning in the middle of the day, as is so, for the whole day, which is so easy to do. And yeah, it taught me a lot being out in that sun rather than being scared of it. And I know you've written articles and all different things about sunscreens and different things, and that we don't need mass dosing of sun baking per se, particularly here in Australia and with different skin types. But perhaps you could touch lightly before we wrap up on skin, because I have enjoyed in recent weeks even learning about skin and how, I guess, intellectually it's kind of like, it's our largest organ, and it absorbs things. I guess academically some of that stuff made sense to me, but I didn't really consider everything our body is absorbing through our skin and how that's really affecting us.
It is funny, isn't it? Because it is the largest surface area. So it's our largest detoxifying organ that breathes. So it clears and it receives. And we clear through perspiration, through sweat, through tears. And equally, it'll absorb whatever we apply topically. That's why it's so important what we wash dishes with, what's in your dishwashing liquid, to what's in your body wash, to what's in your body lotion. All those things matter because our skin will absorb everything as we would eat it. So it is a protective organ. And we need to protect it as well. It can be irritated by the elements, so that's why we need to protect it. So what are some of the things that we can do to protect it? It's what we wash with, it's what we apply topically with, it's the fibers that we wear. All those things will affect the health of our skin, whether we can continue to breathe through our skin with lots of different layers of hopefully natural fabrics, not polyester, that kind of thing. The skin is a sure telltale of many things that are going on internally. The color of our skin, the quality of our skin, how it feels, whether it's tight, irritated, sore, inflamed, red, so on and so on. So it is a reflection of what is going on internally as well. What else can I tell you? It needs sunlight, it needs fresh air, it needs all the things that every other body organ really needs. So it needs an equal amount of care as everything else, but we can't forget about it. We tend to focus a lot on the face, maybe as we age, the neck, and then the rest kind of doesn't get a look in. I think more and more people are doing different things like dry brushing, which has been around for yonks, and we've been telling people to dry brush for 26 years, which is supporting the skin's natural exfoliation, removing dead skin cells so it can feel more comfortable and it can do its job. Whether we're applying something in it or on it to be absorbed, or allowing it to detoxify and cleanse naturally. I think there's a lot that we can learn still about skin and skin health, not just what we are told in regards to aging, wrinkles, and skin cancer. I think there's so much more.
I agree. I think it just became a part of something I kind of abstained in. In terms of, I felt like I was focusing on the inside health, figuring that the outside health would follow, and to some extent that's been, largely true. And I just, it's interesting and I had removed, those irritants from the house and from my skincare, but I didn't consider just the what it could really be telling me, and that relationship between the inside and the outside, looking both from the outside in and out, the inside out, and what that was showing, and what I can also do from the outside in, and to integrate it in different ways. And you are an amazing educator, and I feel very fortunate that we get to cross paths regularly, because the opportunity for people to resonate deeply with how fueling great whole health feels, and wholeness is just an immense fuel source that provides a resiliency in any environment. And that resiliency that amazing health gives us to be the calmest person in the room in any situation, and to help our bodies to be able to respond when they do receive a shock, when they do go through a change, when they are growing, and how to recalibrate, or that when I speak about, building that net underneath, so that if we have a fall, we catch ourselves and we're able to resiliently learn from the experience and come back up and and grow, and not feel like we're going to fall through the floor. And I heard you speaking recently about wholeness, and that word it sat very deeply for me. I know there's lots of words in health and wellness and performance that their meanings change over time, and that aspect of the whole and wholeness sat very strongly. I would love to finish up today. I know there's lots of amazing resources on your site. You have your amazing messengers of health and wellness in your teas that everybody can access. You've got your books and ebooks online, and of course people can call the apothecary and speak to the team there. But I would love to finish with, I ask everybody about their top 5 fuels. And everybody's are different. And some, for me, I mentioned that business play, as I call it, it feels like you and I were speaking recently about play and adult play. So business is like an adult, mature play space for me. It's a way that I can use my intellectual mind. And when I don't have it as a fuel source, my cup feels a bit empty. So I would love to hear from you 5 of your kind of key sources of fuel.
Good question. Stillness, first and foremost, is where everything will come to me in every piece of information. Once everything kind of settles, you can see clearly. And have perspective and have the answer or solution. I think the second one is nature. So really just whether I'm sitting near a tree, acknowledging a tree, whether I'm in a garden, whether I'm by the sea, it doesn't really matter. It's just being outside amongst that. Thirdly, I'm going to say my tisanes, teas, because they help evoke nature and stillness in that moment when I am sipping something medicinal and therapeutic and hydrating. And fourth, I'm going to say, I know people are going to think that I would possibly just say food right now, but I think it is something creative, artistic. It's anything that, again, that activates that part of my nervous system, which, again, that net or that foundation that is joyful and lovely and beautiful and happiness. So anything to do with art, crafts, play, yeah. And there's only 5, so I'm going to say delicious food. Well sourced, well prepared, but delicious food. I love eating. So how can I not have food in my top 5? That's it.
I think that's fantastic. I love asking people for 5 because I think that you get a sense of different things that can go into a recipe of life, and your teas and tisanes are an amazing example of your particular blending of your recipes are incredible. And sometimes we need a high dose or a high amount of one ingredient of our fuels, and other times, like stillness, sometimes we need a lot of it, and sometimes we don't actually. Sometimes actually the dose is a small dose, but it's very powerful, and it depends on the time. And I've found over the years that the connection between each of the different types of fuel is actually really important. And the beautiful Lynn Worsley speaks about resilience being the presence of 3 key elements, and a lot of people think everything just needs to be constantly spinning, but those are what create joy. And my experience, certainly in entering motherhood, was actually that the play that I had with my children made my intellectual time much clearer, just the relationship between the two was very, very strong in my performance, in how I felt, in my conviction, and my ability to be present in each of those spaces, which for me is one of my most important currencies is the ability to be wherever I am and to be wholly in that moment. And I value that immensely. And sometimes it's because I need to fuel myself with food before. Sometimes it's, you know, being out in nature, moving my body in the morning, breathing, all different things. But yeah, I think different fuel sources can fuel people and their growth in different ways. And that's why we started the Business Fuel Challenge, was actually to give people the moment to reflect on different ways that different people fuel themselves in growth. And it's not all about just those intellectual smarts that sit around business. It is the mindset, it is the movement, it is all of those pieces which go into making us the amazing humans that we are. And you have very kindly connected people with some resources, which we will email out to people as well, so that they can help to connect back to the foundations that are right for them. Is there anything else you wanted to leave us with today?
I think we've covered it. I think learning how to recalibrate, and I think we've talked about this before, and creating space and creating awareness so we have choice, so we can feel safe and secure and comfortable and educated. And yeah, because I think with a level of comfort then we can actually heal. Yeah, that's it.
That is a beautiful note to finish us on. We are both very passionate about space. We are both very passionate about sustainability in all its elements, how it shows up in healing, how it shows up in building sustainable businesses, and how it shows up in our beautiful planet, and the space that we need to create in our everyday lives. Space is a word that comes up a lot for you and I, and that ability to have choice from doing the work on the space is incredibly important. So thank you as always for sharing. Everybody can catch Anthia on Instagram. She shares many insights in a very timely, human connected manner, and it is an absolute pleasure to follow you, and you will get access to everything she's doing. She is educating in all different ways. Thank you, Anthia, for absolutely everything that you do and all of your creations. And for everybody, if you have any questions you want to pop down in the comment box, if you've got any questions, you can email us or jump across into the Grow Lab private Facebook group. And until next time, we will catch you there. Bye for now.